वासुदेवाय
ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय
नारायणं नमस्कृत्य
नारायणं नमस्कृत्य.
Chapter 9, Krishna passing away in the presence of Lord Krishna. Text number 14. Sarvam
कालकृतं
manye
मन्ये
Sarvam kalakritam manye
सर्वं कालकृतं मन्ये
Avatam
भवतां
Cha
च
Yat Apriyam
अप्रियं
Avatam Cha Yat Apriyam
भवतां च यत् अप्रियं
Sapalaha
सफलः
Yat Vashe
यद्वशे
Lokaha
लोकः
Sapalo Yat Vashe Loko
सफलो यद्वशे लोको
Vayoho
वायुः
Iva
इव
Ghana Avali
घनावली
Vayoriva Ghana Avali
वायुरिव कालकृतं मन्ये
Bhavatam Cha Yat Apriyam Sapalo Yat Vashe Loko Vayoriva Ghana Avali Sarvam Kalakritam Manye Bhavatam Cha Yat Apriyam Sapalo Yat Vashe Loko Vayoriva Ghana Avali
सर्वं कालकृतं मन्ये
Sarvam Kalakritam Manye
भवतां च यदप्रियं
Bhavatam Cha Yat Apriyam
सकालो यद्वशे लोको
Sapalo Yat Vashe Loko
वायोरिवा घनावलिः
Vayoriva Ghana Avali
सर्वं कालकृतं मन्ये
Sarvam Kalakritam Manye
भवतां च यदप्रियं
Bhavatam Cha Yat Apriyam
सपालो यद्वशे लोको
Sapalo Yat Vashe Loko
वायोरिव घनावली
Vayoriva Ghana Avali Sarvam all these Kalakritam done by the inevitable time Manye I think Bhavatam Cha for you also Yat whatever Apriyam detestable Sapalaha with the rulers Yat Vashe under the control of that time Lokaha everyone in every planet Vayoho like air carry Iva as Ghana Avalihi the bunches of clouds. Translation of the Christ Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. Translation Tribulation. In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. Purport There is control of time all over the space within the universe, as there is control of time all over the planets. All the big gigantic planets, including the sun, are being controlled by the force of air, as the clouds are carried by the force of air. Similarly, the inevitable Kala, or time, controls even the action of the air and other elements. Everything is therefore controlled by the Supreme Kala, a forceful representative of the Lord within the material world. Thus, Yudhishthira should not be sorry for the inconceivable action of time. Everyone has to bear the actions and reactions of time as long as one is within the conditions of the material world. Yudhishthira should not think that he had committed sins in his previous birth and is suffering the consequence. Even the most pious has to suffer the condition of material nature. But a pious man is faithful to the Lord, for he is guided by the bona fide Brahmana and Vaishnava, following the religious principles. These three guiding principles should be the aim of life. One should not be disturbed by the tricks of eternal time. Even the great controller of the universe, Brahmaji, is also under the control of that time. No one should, therefore, grudge being thus controlled by time, despite being a true follower of religious principles. Thus ends it translated to Vedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimade Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschakareshakarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, we are reading from this chapter where Bhishma Deva is actually giving instructions to Maharaj Yudhishthira. So, starting last few verses, Bhishma Deva is actually speaking. So, the condition is such that Maharaj Yudhishthira was very much saddened by the massacre that took place in the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And he was very sorry that maybe he is the cause for all the suffering, all the killings that has taken place. So, although guided by Vyasadeva and Lord Krishna, he could not be convinced, he could not be pacified. And therefore, by the plan of Lord Krishna, Maharaj Yudhishthira along with his brothers and Lord Krishna, they all come to the place of the massacre, the battlefield of Kurukshetra where the massacre took place, and Bhishma Deva is lying there on a bed of arrows. And so Maharaj Yudhishthira, in a very aristocratic way, along with his brothers, Lord Krishna, arrived there. And also, great sages from all over the universe, from different parts of the world, came there to hear what Bhishma Deva is going to say, and also to witness the great passing away of Bhishma Deva. So, in this, once everyone arrives, Bhishma Deva receives them very well. In fact, he worships the Lord Krishna appropriately, duly. And then he starts speaking. So, 2 verses ago, Bhishma Deva starts speaking about the great sufferings and the terrible injustices that the Pandavas had to undergo. And then in the previous verse, he also mentions about the great troubles that Kunti Maharani had to undergo. Now, the question would come, this verse talks about Sarvam Kala Kritam Manye. So, all these great sufferings and injustices. So, actually, the Pandavas had to undergo great sufferings. In fact, Prabhupada in another place mentions that Mother Devaki had to undergo suffering only once at the hands of his cruel brother. But in case of Kunti Maharani and Pandavas, it was prolonged suffering. One suffering after another, one suffering after another. The Pandavas were fed with poisoned cake. They were put in a house made of shellal and was put into fire. Then they were sent to forest where Bhima had to fight man-eaters like Hidimba. And Draupadi was insulted in the assembly of Kurus. And in this way, there were different troubles that the Pandavas were undergoing. Now, naturally, when one is undergoing a lot of suffering, a lot of injustices, there is no reason why we were supposed to be put into such difficulties. And imagine if we were also put into some difficulties, prolonged difficulties, naturally the question arises, who is the cause of this suffering? What is the cause of this injustice? And we have some perspective of how we look at what causes injustice, what causes suffering. But here, Bhishma Deva is speaking in this verse and the following few verses. He is going to explain what could be the cause of this suffering, especially in the case of great devotees and pious king like Yudhishthira. What is the cause? So, today, if there is small injustice happens, actually there are so many new departments which are emerging called like social injustice movements, or social injustice has become a subject. And people are trying to figure out why there is injustice. What is the cause of injustice? How can we prevent injustice? And there are various ways people attribute. And they try to identify the cause of social injustice. Sometimes they say, okay, it's government policies. Or sometimes they say certain systemic oppression. Or various factors. So, a conditioned living entity can only see a certain external factors as a cause of oppression or struggle. But a conditioned living entity cannot understand the finite aspects of why one may be suffering, why there may be so-called apparent discrepancies in the socio-economic system, or the so-called justice system, and so on and so forth, is not easily understandable. And even as devotees, sometimes we also think that how come we are put into difficulties? We are doing devotional service, we are serving the Lord, so how can we be put into difficulty? We shouldn't be put into difficulties. The materialistic people, yes, they should be put into difficulties because they are materialists. But we are devotees, so we should be free from suffering. And if some suffering comes, we also become aggressive sometimes. We think it is not for me to suffer, so I give something back. So this is how sometimes common people think. But here, Bhishma Deva is giving final principles of what is the reason, what could be the reason. And here he is saying, Manye, I think. Now it's very important to notice that Srila Prabhupada often says, what is the value of I think? You know, most often people say, I think, I believe. And Prabhupada says, what is the value of that? So actually, there is no value for a common man's what I think, what I believe. But when we hear from great authorities, what they think is very important. What they say is very important. Because Bhishma Deva is one of the 12 Mahajanas. He knows the religious principles. He knows what is right, what is wrong, what is the cause, real cause of something. So hearing from great Mahajanas like Bhishma Deva helps us to see things which we cannot see directly. So here Bhishma Deva is saying, Sarvam Kalakritam Manye. So he is saying, all this is done by inevitable time. All these sufferings, injustices are done by the inevitable time. It's very interesting to see how Prabhupada is actually translating this term, Kalakritam, not just as done by time. Prabhupada inevitable times. It's very important to notice this extra word, inevitable. Inevitable means no one can escape, it is for sure. The time factor, no one can escape. Actually, we are all encompassed under the influence of time factor. Yet, we cannot perceive it. Sometimes we think we can escape it. By some jugglery, some scientists may think, okay, I'll invent a time machine, I'll invent some other process of anti-aging, I'll do some other thing, and I'll escape the factor of time. But actually, no one can escape. It is irreversible. Every living entity who has taken birth has to die for certain. The time factor forces everyone born to grow, to become old, and eventually die. Similarly, the time factor, as Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport, is influencing everyone in every planet. There is no place where there is no influence of time in this material world. Prabhupada is saying in the purport, there is control by time all over the space within the universe. All over the space within the universe. Over all the planets. In fact, the time factor determines the creation, how long something will exist, and when it will dissolve. We may think we have control, or someone else has control, but no. We are all under the influence of time. There is a cartoon that I came across some time ago, where it is said that there were two people who were fighting in the car, and they were unaware that in the process of fighting they were not paying attention, the driver was not paying attention to where they are going, and actually they were about to fall from a cliff. So the petty worry of both of them was so important that they both were falling into a valley. So similarly, sometimes when we are not aware of higher principles of existence, we get caught up in mundane things. We take up petty things. We do not know the force of time, the indestructible, the inevitable time is taking away our life. We are crashing to the wall. The death is coming. Because we don't see the time factor, we think there is no control of time. We are in control of everything. Especially when we are young, we do not recognize that the influence of time is always upon us. So this factor of time is the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. They are also wonderful texts. In fact, Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada writes in the very introduction, there are 5 fundamental truths that are described in Bhagavad Gita. Ishvara, Shiva, Karma, Prakriti, Kala. And that Prabhupada writes that it is important to understand how under the influence of time all these things are happening. So these things are not discussed anywhere else. And in fact, furthermore in the third canto, between the discussion between Vidura and Maitreya, there is furthermore description about the time factor. In fact, there is even description about what is time, how it is calculated, and so on and so forth. And the description of time in terms of the minute amount of time to the yugas that we have, actually the span of time that is being described in Bhagavatam is also astounding. So there is so much knowledge that is actually available in Bhagavatam. In fact, one place regarding the discussion about the time as how time is measured, it is described. In that place, Prabhupada writes that actually scientists should understand what this is being said in Bhagavatam. They should take this as a research topic. So these texts are not ordinary. And what is being said is quite profound. And here, one of the reasons for suffering that is being described as kalpatam, due to inevitable time, under whose control everyone in every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind. The clouds are helplessly being moved by the wind. They cannot protest, they cannot stay away. They're forced, carried away by the wind. Similarly, everyone in every planet is being carried. Therefore, everything is controlled by the Supreme Kala. So one should not think one is independent. Only someone who is very grossly materialistic thinks he is free from all control. Actually, no one is free from control. Prabhupada says, to some degree one may be a controller, but at the same time one is controlled. To a certain degree, one may be maybe an IHF officer, or maybe a state representative, or maybe so and so, but above him there is someone else. In this world of relative world, there is no one who is absolute controller. Everyone is controlled. Prabhupada says, if you go on looking and if you find anyone who is not controlled by anyone else or anything else, then he is God. But everyone else is controlled to some degree or the other degree. In this relative world, it's only a matter of difference of how much one is controlling and how much one is controlled. But both are always active. No one is free from being controlled. And Prabhupada gives various examples to illustrate this point. Prabhupada says sometimes the citizen may be in delirium, he may be forgetful of the fact that he is under the control of the state government. He may think he is free to act the way he wants. But one is not free. One is controlled by the laws of the state. So similarly, we are all also are controlled. If we do not know that, we think we are artificial controllers. We can control everything. We can push anything to any extent. But that's not true. And here, Prabhupada writes that because that this Supreme Kala, everything is controlled by Supreme Kala. And what is this Kala? Prabhupada is also mentioning here that it is a forceful representative of the Lord within the material world. It is a representative of the Lord. It is an impersonal feature of the Lord, which is controlling everything. So this is another very important principle that the devotees, when they see the relationship with the Lord. They see in relationship to the Lord, what is this time factor? A materialist only can think of time in terms of the clock. He cannot see what is his relationship with the Lord. Forceful representative of the Lord, that is what is being written here. So actually, time is such in various places. It is mentioned, like in Bhagavad Gita 11.32, it is said, Kalosmi lokshaya prit pravritho. Time I am the great destroyer of the worlds. So the Lord reveals that He Himself is the time factor. So which is the ultimate source of destruction. And so it is the factor of time is eternal. It is always existent. And it is here the Lord is saying, I am that time. So just see how wonderful these texts are, that actually by seeing everything you can actually see the relationship with the Lord. You can remember the Lord. Just like the moonshine, the sunshine, the taste of the water, the time factor, we should all think in relationship to the Lord. And how it is influencing us, how we are controlled by the time. So when we understand this, we can become humble. We can recognize that we are not the ultimate controller. Because otherwise, this false sense of notion that I am the controller, I am the independent controller, the complete controller overtakes us. Especially the factor of success. When success comes, when things is under my control, everything took place. It is my ability which led to everything to happen. There was no other factor. But then again, when suffering comes, one thinks that everything else is done by some other cause which is outside me. Some individual is the cause, or we try to blame or not realize that what are the different reasons for my own suffering. In terms of theologians, they talk this as the problem of evil. Why there should be evil when there is God? How can one be suffering if there is God? And even more so, how can a devotee be suffering? So here, Prabhupada writes in the purport, Yudhishthira should not be sorry for the inconceivable action of time. So sometimes it is, as Prabhupada mentions here, that it is not because Yudhishthira has committed some sinful acts in the past and therefore they are suffering. This is not the cause of suffering in this case. So there are different levels of reasons why one may be suffering. One is because of one's own past activities. So sometimes the reaction to specific activity may be immediate, sometimes it may happen after some time, or it may take after a prolonged time. After many births, one will get the reactions, and therefore one will be suffering. Just like sometimes we do not know how much suffering we get to others, other living entities. Sometimes some suffering comes to us, we do not recognize maybe there was a cause of some suffering, some other living entity at some point of time. Maybe I was harsh, maybe I was, maybe I killed some animals. Just like Mandukya Muni, he gave pain to an ant, and Yamaraj punishes him, orders him to be pierced by spear. So, just as a child, Mandukya Muni kind of troubles an ant, and he was later given punishment. Although there are more nuances to that story, but the point here is we do not know how much suffering we are causing. Yet when suffering comes, we do not take any responsibility for our actions in the past. Rather, we only blame others. Especially in case of all of us, we must reflect, introspect. Am I also giving suffering like this to others? And become sensitive. And finally, in our consciousness, at least from now, we should not be the cause of suffering. We should not be the cause of anxiety. We should not artificially lord over other living entities. Otherwise, we will also encounter similar trouble by the laws of nature. No one can escape the laws of nature. If I give suffering, definitely I will get suffering. Now, but here, the case is very different. Here we are not talking about ordinary conditioned living entities. Here we are talking about the Pandavas, who were righteous, who were always following the code of religion, religious principles. Now, how can suffering come to them? And so much suffering, why should it come? There is no way to explain this in terms of the activities performed by them and the reactions to that. This is not the way to understand their suffering. So here, Bhishma Deva is further clarifying in the next few verses, he will elaborate furthermore. So, Prabhupada also writes here that Yudhishthira should not think that he had committed sins in his previous birth and is suffering the consequence. It is not because of that. So suffering, sometimes we see of ordinary person, and sometimes we may say pure devotee also apparently looking like suffering. but we should not equate both of them. Here, the cause of suffering is not because of one's activities, but it is because of the inevitable factor of time. And Prabhupada also mentions that this is inconceivable action of time. It is not possible for us to fully conceive the action of time. Why at some point someone is given some benefit? Why at some place someone doesn't seem to be suffering where one is supposed to suffer? Someone may be working very hard but suffering. Someone is not working so hard yet enjoying. What is the reason? Sometimes it's very difficult. How is the time factor unfolding things? So here it has been said that no one can escape suffering in this world. Prabhupada writes that even great pious men, be it Pandavas or anyone, they have to undergo, even the most pious has to suffer the condition of material nature. So if even the most pious has to suffer, then what is the hope? If the pious is suffering and the impious is suffering, if one is suffering because of karma and another is suffering because of khala, how does it matter? Then what is the point of being a devotee? Or how does it make any difference? But there is difference. In case of a devotee, the sufferings are also the mercy of the Lord. They also enable one to advance in spiritual life. Whereas in the case of the materialists, the impious, their sufferings do not lead them to the advancement. Their suffering does not help them to come out of the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease, or see the hand of the Lord, or to realize higher spiritual principles. That doesn't come. But in case of a devotee, it is the special blessings of the Lord. The sufferings are not a random act. In fact, it is also explained in different places. The karma or the influence of activities on the devotee is not the same as the influence of karma on non-devotees. One of the examples that is given is of Chitraketu. Chitraketu, when he was flying in his aeroplane, which was given by Lord Vishnu, he actually sees Mother Parvati and Lord Shiva being seated in an assembly. So Lord Shiva was actually embracing Mother Parvati, who was sitting on his lap, and he was sitting in the assembly. Then Chitraketu makes some comments. How can Lord Shiva embrace Mother Parvati in the assembly of saintly people? And although hearing this, Lord Shiva just gently smiles and he doesn't take offense, he doesn't say anything. But Mother Parvati becomes very angry. He says, how can you make this comment like this? How dare you? Who gave you this authority to chastise, to become the controller and the punisher of everyone? Where did you get this from? And she curses him. So when Chitraketu was cursed, what he does was he realizes his mistake and he comes down basically with folded hands. He comes down from his airplane, goes down to Mother Parvati, and he says that I accept this curse upon me. I do not mind the curse, for happiness and distress are given by the demigods as a result of one's past things. So here he is saying that it's because of my past deeds, maybe I'm going to get this curse, so I'll accept this. But in the purport, Prabhupada writes something very important. He says that Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in this connection that one who has developed Krishna consciousness and who exists in love of Krishna is no longer subject to suffering and happiness under the laws of karma. Indeed, he is beyond karma. The Brahma Samhita says, Karmani nirdhati kintu cha bhakti bhajam A devotee is free from the reactions of his karma because he has taken to devotional service. So, as soon as one takes to devotional service, one is free from the reactions of his karma. In fact, initiation, when pure devotee awards initiation, actually it is like it's a full stop to the past sinful reactions are not counted anymore. But as it is said, just like there is a moving fan and you switch off the fan, but because of some momentum, the fan will be moving a little further, but actually the connection is pulled up. Similarly, we may experience some effects of remnants, but actually Prabhupada mentions even in the letter to Saksharu, he says that so far your question is concerned, you should understand that a devotee is never under any karmic reaction. Whatever is happening is by the mercy of Lord Krishna. That should be the viewpoint of the devotee. Once surrendered to Krishna, karmic reactions immediately gone. But if he acts independently again, then he is again in the clutches of Maya. So this is very important that, and Prabhupada here gives the same example of the fan switched off. When the fan is switched off, it is still running some rounds, but that will be stopped very soon. That is his position. Therefore, a pure devotee who is having some adverse reaction, he doesn't take ill of it. He knows that the karmic reaction is already stopped, but what is happening is a residual running of the fan even after the switch is off. So, in case of a devotee, the suffering or the karmic reaction is not like that of an ordinary person. In this case, it is in fact, the devotee looks at it as a blessing of the Lord. He never sees that why did Lord put me in this difficulty. He knows that the Lord has a plan. He has faith in the Lord. This is very important because our faith gets intensified in the time of trouble. We make jump when there is trouble in our Krishna conscious journey. It's a test for us. Will we depend upon the Lord or we depend on an external factor, on a material factor? But a devotee accepts the suffering because of one's own mistakes, depends on the Lord and moves forward. And therefore, here it is very important that it has been mentioned here that what do devotees do? So, they are guided they are faithful to the Lord and guided by the bona fide Brahmana and Vaishnava or the religious principles. So this is very important. A devotee does not give up his faith to the Lord. In fact, his faith is solidified. But how is it solidified? Because it is guided by Vaishnavas and Brahmanas who are following religious principles. Therefore, staying in association is very, very important. Otherwise, the tricks of the eternal time, one cannot conceive, neither one can escape, rather one gets fearful, one becomes bewildered. How is this coming to me? I did so much devotional service, I did so much donations, now all the suffering is coming to me, one can become bewildered. And one starts thinking, well, what is the difference between doing devotional service and not doing devotional service? Both seem similar. But only when one is guided in association by bona fide Brahmana and Vaishnava, then one can understand that one should not be disturbed by all these tricks of time. In fact, Prabhupada says that even Brahmaji, the creator of the universe, is under the influence of time. Sometimes even he is tricked by the time to act in a specific way or encounter a specific situation of struggle or difficulty. Therefore, one should not grudge being thus controlled by time, despite being a true follower of religious principles. Just because we are following devotional service, we should not think that we are free from the clutches of time or we should not think that we should not get into the clutches of time, or we should not think that there should be no suffering. We should think that there is a Lord's plan even if there is suffering. And in fact, we should think it is because of our own past deeds that we are suffering. But by the blessings of the Lord, it is minimized. That's how we should see it. I should have actually suffered more for what I have done. But by the blessings of the Lord, the spiritual master, it is so minimized. I should be so thankful. I should be so grateful in suffering that the Lord has been so kind. And by staying in association, we develop greater faith. In fact, difficulties are a time when we can intensify our faith if we are looking at it the right way. Because quite often, in difficulties, our true nature comes out, whether we are dependent on the Lord or not. And that is possible when guided by Brahmanas and Vaishnavas, bona fide Brahmanas and Vaishnavas. It's very important. Without this knowledge, people are very much bewildered. This is one common question the people say, that what is the point of being a devotee when you are going suffering, I am undergoing suffering? What is the difference? Why should you be a devotee and not enjoy like me? And sometimes devotees also might think like that. Oh, he is enjoying and I am not enjoying. I am also suffering, he is also suffering sometimes. There's not much difference. There's a lot of difference. In the case of devotee, the Lord is specifically arranging things in a specific way for purification. And those sufferings are stepping stones for spiritual advancement. Unless one does not take it in the wrong way. So these scriptures, instructions of Vishnu-deva are very important for us to see how not to be bewildered by the influence of time, how to recognize the influence of time. And Prabhupada is also explaining as how we should also look as what is the cause of suffering in this case. It is not their activities, the past karma. So all this understanding helps us to see how to perceive various difficulties that come in our life, how to perceive the influence of time. And as it is said in Bhagavatam, only devotees can overcome the influence of time. Because time is the representative of the Lord, and when a devotee actually surrenders to the Lord, or actually hears Krishna Katha, renders devotional service, one is beyond the clutches of time. Because the time, which usually is considered destructive, that influence of being destructively influenced by time is not felt by a devotee. The example that is given of how a lion carries the cub in his jaw, but it is not feeling, or the cat is carrying the kitten in the jaws, but it is not feeling fearful. But the same lion, when it is carrying someone else, one is very fearful. For a devotee, the time, although it may look sometimes fierce, but because he knows that this is a representative of the Lord, the devotee is not fearful. So only by taking shelter of the Lord, one can overcome the so-called fearful, forceful nature of time upon us. So we'll stop here and see if there are questions or comments. There are no questions or comments, we'll stop here. Congratulations, Bhagavatam ki. Krishna Prabhupada ki. We also have a special event today where we are going to celebrate Prabhupada's arrival.